A struggling mechanic pulled a stalled Ferrari into her tiny roadside garage and fixed what 3 certified specialists had missed. The stranger she helped that rainy night said nothing about who he was, what he owned, or why a billionaire CEO was standing alone on a highway in the middle of a storm. The last thing Sofia Reyes needed on a Thursday night was a problem that wasn't hers. She had already worked 11 hours. Her back hurt. Her hands were cracked from engine grease she could never fully wash out, no matter how hard she scrubbed. The overdue electricity bill was tucked under the counter because looking at it too long made her chest tighten. And her 8-year-old son Leo was waiting at Mrs. Patel's house 2 streets away, probably already asleep on that old couch with his shoes still on. She was locking the garage door, her father's garage technically, though he had been gone 3 years now, and the debt he left behind hadn't gone anywhere, when she saw it. A red Ferrari stopped dead on the side of the highway access road 50 meters away, hazard lights blinking weakly in the pouring rain. Sofia stood still for a second. The rain hammered the tin roof of the garage entrance. Lightning cracked somewhere far over the hills. The sensible part of her brain, the part that calculated every risk and every cost before doing anything, said, "Not your problem." She turned back toward the door. Then the car's hazard lights blinked once more and died completely. She exhaled through her nose, grabbed her jacket off the hook. The man standing beside the Ferrari looked like someone who had never been rained on before in his life and was furious about it. He was tall, maybe mid-30s, dark hair plastered flat against his forehead. His jacket alone probably cost more than Sofia's monthly rent. He was holding his phone up at various angles with the specific desperation of someone searching for signal and failing. "You need help?" Sofia called over the rain. He looked at her worn jacket, her grease-stained boots, the ancient flashlight in her hand, with the kind of polite disbelief that wealthy people sometimes use when they're trying not to seem rude. "I already called a service," he said. "Which one?" A pause. "Martinez Towing." Sofia almost laughed. "They don't come out past the highway exit in rain. Their truck slid into a ditch last April. They still haven't fully fixed it." She clicked on the flashlight and nodded toward the car. "Pop the hood." He didn't move immediately. Something in his face shifted. Not quite suspicion, more like calculation. Then, quietly, he reached in and released the hood. The engine bay was beautiful. Sofia wasn't the type to get emotional about machines, but even she paused for half a second. V8, mid-mounted, the kind of engineering that made you understand why some people spent fortunes on cars. She moved the flashlight slowly, not rushing, reading the engine the way her father had taught her. Don't look for what's wrong first. Look at what's right, and the wrong will show itself. It showed itself in about 90 seconds. "Intermittent ground fault," she said. "Probably the secondary ECU harness. Did it cut out suddenly or sputter first?" The man blinked. "Sputtered 3 times, then cut completely." "Right." She straightened. "I can fix it, but not out here. Can you steer while I push? My garage is right there." He looked at the garage, then back at her. "You're serious?" "You're getting wetter by the second," she said. "So am I. Up to you." He got in. She pushed. The Ferrari rolled. Inside the garage, under proper light, Sofia worked quickly. She didn't have Ferrari diagnostic equipment, obviously. What she had was a set of tools her father had collected over 30 years, a mind that could read an engine almost by instinct, and no patience for problems she could actually solve. The man, he hadn't offered his name and she hadn't asked, stood near the office doorway and watched in silence. Not in a demanding way, more like someone who wasn't used to watching other people work and was finding it unexpectedly interesting. "The certified mechanic in the city looked at it on Monday," he said after a while. She didn't look up. "He said it was fine." He missed it. Apparently. She found the exact fault 20 minutes later, a microfracture in the harness connector. invisible unless you knew to flex it under load. An easy miss for someone relying purely on digital diagnostic tools. A clear find for someone who'd grown up doing it by hand. She spliced it, insulated it, ran a manual continuity check, started the engine. Clean ignition, no sputter. She stepped back and wiped her hands. "It'll hold," she said. "Get it properly rerouted within the week. Any Ferrari specialist can do it once they know what to look for." The man was quiet for a moment. He was looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Not quite gratitude, something more like surprise at himself for being surprised. "What do I owe you?" he asked. 60, she said. He reached into his jacket and held out a thick fold of cash. She could see it was far more than 60, the kind of amount that would cover the electricity bill and the water bill, and maybe Leo's school shoes. She took 3 notes, handed the rest back. He didn't take it immediately. His eyes moved, just briefly, to the pinboard above the office desk, past photos of a younger Sophia with her father outside this same garage, past Leo's crayon drawing of a race car stuck to the wall with tape, past the electricity notice she hadn't put away properly. He took the money back, slowly. He didn't say anything about any of it. "Thank you," he said instead, simply, like he meant it. Sophia nodded, already thinking about Leo. She grabbed her keys. Outside, the rain was beginning to ease. The Ferrari started perfectly on the first turn, slid quietly out onto the wet road, and disappeared into the dark. She stood at the garage entrance for a moment. $60, she thought, and a whole lot of nothing changes. She locked up and walked to get her son. She had no idea she had just changed everything. 2 days later, the Ferrari came back. Sophia was under a Hyundai Sonata, halfway through a brake job, when she heard the unmistakable low purr of an expensive engine pulling into her lot. She didn't think much of it at first. Then she heard it idle and stop, and something about the sound was too clean, too precise, the kind of engine that had recently been fixed properly. She rolled out from under the car. There it was, red, gleaming even under the flat morning sky. And there he was, leaning against the driver's side door with his arms crossed, wearing a plain gray shirt this time, like he'd made a deliberate effort to dress down. Sophia stood up and pulled the rag from her pocket. "It's making a strange sound," he said. She looked at him. Then she looked at the car. She wiped her hands slowly, walked over, crouched beside the front left wheel well, and listened. The engine ticked quietly as it cooled. That was it. Normal metal cooling after a drive. Nothing else. She stood back up. "No, it isn't," she said flatly. He held her gaze for a moment. Then, surprisingly, the corner of his mouth moved. Almost a smile. Like he'd been caught doing something minor and found it mildly amusing. "I'm Adrian," he said. "I know you're not here about the car, Adrian." He didn't deny it. Instead, he looked around the garage, at the 2 other vehicles waiting for service, at the handwritten job sheets pinned to the board, at the small makeshift desk in the corner where a math worksheet sat half-finished next to a juice box. "Is that your son's?" he asked. "He sits with me after school until I close." Sophia said it without apology, no explanation either, just the fact of her life, offered plainly. Adrian nodded like he understood something he hadn't before. He stayed. Not intrusively. He didn't pace or hover or make conversation she didn't invite. He sat on the old wooden bench near the garage entrance with a coffee he'd apparently bought from the petrol station down the road, and he simply existed in the space while Sophia worked. It should have been strange. Somehow, it wasn't. What was strange was how much she noticed him noticing things. The moment a customer spoke to her rudely about his car taking an extra day, Adrian's jaw tightened slightly and he looked away, like he was choosing not to react. When Leo arrived after school and immediately started telling Sophia about a football match in enormous detail, while she simultaneously diagnosed a transmission fault and nodded at every sentence, Adrian watched the whole thing with an expression she couldn't name. Not pity, something quieter than pity. By 4 o'clock, she had taken 3 phone calls, fixed 1 car, quoted 2 others, argued a parts supplier down on a price, and reminded Leo twice to finish the worksheet. Adrian had not moved from the bench. "Don't you have somewhere to be?" she finally asked. "Probably," he said, looking at his phone with the mild detachment of someone reading messages they've already decided to ignore. She didn't think about him again until that evening. Her second job was at Millie's Diner on Route 9, Thursday to Saturday, 5 hours a night, decent tips when the truckers were in good moods, and almost nothing when they weren't. She'd worked there 18 months. It paid the water bill. That was what it was for. She was refilling coffee at the counter around 8 when she noticed him in the far corner booth. He wasn't looking at her. He was reading something on his phone, a half-eaten sandwich on the plate in front of him, looking for all the world like a regular customer who had wandered in off the road. She almost convinced herself it was a coincidence. Then a trucker at the counter snapped his fingers at her. Actually snapped his fingers, like she was a dog, and said his eggs were cold and he wanted new ones for free. Sophia took the plate without a word. She came back 5 minutes later with fresh eggs, set them down, smiled, and moved on. Because that was the job. That was how it worked. You absorbed it, and you moved on. When she glanced at the corner booth again, Adrian was no longer reading his phone. He was watching her, not with curiosity this time, with something harder in his eyes, the look of someone storing information, making a note of something. She looked away first. At 9:30, when her shift ended, she found an envelope tucked under the wiper of her car in the diner parking lot. Inside was enough cash to cover her electricity bill, the exact amount she owed, to the dollar. No note. Sophia stood in the cold parking lot for a long moment, the envelope in her hand. She looked up and down the empty road. She thought about Adrian's face in that corner booth, the way he'd watched her absorb that trucker's cruelty with a smile because she had no other choice. She put the envelope in her pocket. She told herself she was angry. She drove home and checked on Leo and told herself again. It didn't quite stick. The letter arrived on a Friday morning, which felt deliberate somehow, like bad news preferred the end of the week. Sophia almost missed it in the pile of usual envelopes, a parts catalog, a water bill, something from Leo's school about a field trip. But the yellow stamp in the corner of the thick white envelope stopped her hand. Final notice. She had seen that stamp before, twice, and both times she had managed to do something about it before it got worse. She opened it standing at the kitchen counter while Leo ate breakfast 3 feet away. 30 days. The garage property, her father's garage, the building, the lot, everything, would be seized and transferred to the lending institution unless the outstanding debt of $41,000 was settled in full. Not a payment plan, not a partial settlement, full amount. She read it twice. Then she folded it carefully, the way you fold something you don't want to be real, and slid it under the fruit bowl.
"What was that?" Leo asked without looking up from his cereal.
"Nothing important," she said. "Eat, you'll miss the bus." She drove to the bank on her lunch break. The man behind the desk had kind eyes and a very practiced way of explaining things that couldn't be changed, as though he genuinely wished they could be. The debt was real. The timeline was real. Her father had taken a second loan during his illness. She'd known about it, just not the full amount. And after 3 years of minimum payments and missed months, the principal had barely moved, while the interest had not stopped for a single day. "Is there anything—" she started. "Ms. Reyes," he paused. "At this balance, with this timeline, the realistic options are very limited." She drove back to the garage and finished the afternoon's work and didn't tell anyone. What Sophia didn't know was that on that same Friday, across town in a rented serviced apartment he'd been using for the past 2 weeks, Adrian Voss was reading about her. Not in a threatening way, not surveillance. He had simply asked his one trusted assistant, a woman named Claire, who had worked for him for 9 years, and who treated his occasional strange requests with professional calm, to find out what she could about the woman who ran the roadside garage on the Route 9 access road. What Claire sent back was a file that Adrian read in full twice. Sofia Reyes, 31. Father, Marco Reyes, mechanic, deceased 3 years ago from a prolonged illness. Mother, left when Sofia was 11, not in contact. Sofia had won a regional scholarship at 17 for automotive engineering, a full ride to a university program with an exceptional entry record. She had deferred once, then deferred again. Then quietly, without announcement, she had never gone. The reason was a single line in a public record, birth registration. Leo Reyes, father, listed, then later struck through in a separate legal filing. Adrian set the tablet down. He thought about the juice box on the garage desk, the math worksheet, the way Sofia had answered the trucker's cruelty with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, the electricity bill on the pinboard that she had almost managed to hide with a job sheet. He thought about a woman who had earned the right to study something she loved and had given it up, not because she failed, but because someone left, and a child needed her, and the garage needed her, and there was simply no one else. He picked the tablet back up and kept reading. By Saturday, something else was happening that Sofia also didn't know about. A man named Gerald Watts, who was Adrian's head of corporate strategy and had been for 6 years, had grown deeply uneasy. Adrian had missed 2 board calls. He had declined a meeting with the merger's lead investors, and when Gerald's assistant had quietly traced Adrian's phone activity, not something Gerald would ever admit to, the location data pointed consistently to the same small stretch of Route 9, a highway town 40 minutes outside the city. Gerald pulled up satellite maps. A diner, a garage. Nothing. Nothing that made sense. He made a note. He told himself it was concern. He was lying to himself, but he was very good at it and didn't notice. On Sunday evening, Sofia sat on the back step of the garage after closing, Leo asleep inside on the small camp bed she kept there for late nights. The foreclosure letter was in her jacket pocket. She'd carried it all weekend like a stone she couldn't put down. 30 days. She was good at fixing things, engines, transmissions, electrical faults that stumped people with far more equipment than her. She had fixed problems her whole life because there was never anyone else to do it. But $41,000 in 30 days wasn't a problem you fixed with your hands. She sat there until the cold made her go inside. She didn't know that the man who had watched her absorb humiliation in a diner without flinching had spent part of his weekend learning every quiet sacrifice she had ever made. She didn't know that what was coming next would not feel like rescue. It would feel, at first, like humiliation of a completely different kind. The invitation came through a phone call, not a card, which Sofia later thought should have been her first warning. Adrian called on Monday morning while she was signing for a parts delivery. He was polite, direct, and slightly awkward in a way she hadn't expected from him, like someone who didn't ask for things often and wasn't entirely comfortable starting now. He was attending an automotive charity event on Saturday evening, a showcase of prototype vehicles, engine concepts, industry people. He wanted her opinion on some of the engineering on display. Her eyes, specifically. The way she read machines. "You want to take me to a party," Sofia said. "I want to take someone who actually understands engines to an event full of people who only pretend to," he said. She almost said no. The garage was behind on 2 jobs. Leo had a football match Saturday morning she couldn't miss. She owned exactly 1 dress that wasn't either a work uniform or something she'd bought for her father's funeral. She said yes. She couldn't explain why, and she didn't try. The hotel was the kind of place that had a name instead of a star rating because it didn't need one. Marble floors, soft lighting engineered to make everyone look expensive. Prototype vehicles positioned under spotlights like sculptures, roped off with velvet like they were art. Sophia walked in wearing her black dress and her cleanest shoes and felt immediately, completely wrong. Not because of how she looked. She knew she looked fine. It was everything else. The way conversations stopped half a second when she passed. The way two women near the entrance looked at her dress and then at each other in a way they clearly thought was subtle. The way a waiter somehow appeared for every other guest immediately and took an extra 3 minutes to find her. Adrian stayed close. He introduced her to 2 engineers whose names she immediately forgot, and a racing director who shook her hand with the limp enthusiasm of someone who had already decided she wasn't worth a firm grip. She was doing fine. She was managing. Then she met Richard Holt. Richard Holt was 60, loud in the specific way that men become when every room has agreed with them for decades, and he was apparently a celebrated name in European motorsport engineering. He asked Sophia what she did. She told him. His face did something complicated.
A roadside garage, he repeated, as though she'd said something in a foreign language he found beneath him. He looked at Adrian. Is this a joke of some kind? No, Adrian said. His voice had gone very flat. No offense to... Holt waved a hand at Sophia without finishing her name or the sentence. But this is a room of serious professionals. There's a reason these events have a guest criteria. Sophia felt the heat move up the back of her neck. She knew the feeling well, the specific combination of anger and shame that came from being dismissed in public. She had learned a long time ago to keep her face still when it happened. She kept her face still. Richard, Adrian started. It's fine, Sophia said quietly. She turned away from Holt and looked at the nearest prototype vehicle. Cleaner to look at engines than at people who behaved like that. The prototype was a hydrogen-electric hybrid concept from a German firm, beautiful and probably worth more than her garage. She stood near it and breathed slowly and let her eyes move over what she could see of the engineering. That was when she noticed it. A faint smell, almost nothing, the kind of thing you'd miss in a room full of perfume and canapes, and a very slight discoloration near the base of the fuel cell housing. Not dramatic, easy to overlook under soft event lighting if you weren't specifically looking at it. She was specifically looking at it. She turned and found a young technician standing nearby who was clearly with the German firm by the lanyard around his neck. She spoke quickly and quietly. He looked at her with the same mild dismissal she'd been collecting all evening. She said 3 specific technical sentences. His expression changed. He made a call. 40 seconds later, 2 senior engineers from the firm were beside the car, and 30 seconds after that, they were moving very quickly to prevent what would have been, as the lead engineer later confirmed to the room with genuine shaking in his voice, a hydrogen fuel cell ignition event. In a crowded hotel ballroom, with 200 people inside. The room went very quiet. Then it went very loud. Sophia was standing near the back of the crowd when Adrian found her. He didn't say anything immediately. He just stood beside her and looked at the chaos of relieved engineers and ashen investors, and one very pale hotel event manager. Then he looked at her. She glanced up and caught his expression before he could arrange it into something more composed. It was open and unguarded in a way she hadn't seen from him before. Something close to wonder. Richard Holt was 15 feet away, completely silent, not looking at anyone. Your roadside eyes, Adrian said quietly, just stopped a disaster. Sophia looked back at the room. Now can we leave? She said, before someone asks me to valet the cars. Adrian laughed, genuinely, fully laughed, and it surprised them both. The call came Tuesday morning, 3 days after the charity event. Adrian's assistant, Claire, formal and efficient, told Sophia there was a vehicle consultation at the corporate office that Adrian wanted her present for, something about a new prototype assessment.
Sophia almost asked why he couldn't just come to the garage like before, but the address Claire gave her was in the financial district, and the words corporate office had a weight to them that made her pause. She arranged for Mrs. Patel to watch Leo after school. She wore her cleanest work clothes, not the black dress work clothes, because this was supposedly professional. She drove her 12-year-old Honda into the financial district and found a parking meter 2 blocks away because the building's underground lot had a rate that made her genuinely laugh out loud. She walked into the lobby and understood immediately that something was wrong with the story she'd been given. The building was 40 stories of glass and steel with a logo above the reception desk that she recognized without being able to immediately place it. Voss Automotive Group. Clean serif letters in gunmetal gray. She stood at the entrance and let the recognition arrive slowly. Voss Automotive Group. She knew that name. Everyone in the industry knew that name. 14 vehicle brands across 9 countries. The Safety Innovation Division that had redesigned rear impact standards 8 years ago. The Engineering Scholarship Fund that 3 of her father's old industry contacts had mentioned over the years as the only corporate program worth applying to. Adrian Voss. She turned the full name over in her mind and felt something cold settle in her stomach. The receptionist was already on the phone. Within 2 minutes, a young assistant appeared, smiling, and offered to take her up. Sophia followed him into a lift that was quieter and faster than should have been physically possible, watching the floor numbers climb, rearranging everything she thought she understood about the last 2 weeks. The office on the 38th floor had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city. It was not the office of someone who consulted on prototypes. It was the office of someone who decided whether prototypes existed at all. Adrian was standing at the window when she walked in. He turned, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked slightly uncertain. She didn't let him speak first. "Voss Automotive Group," she said. A pause. "Yes. You own it?" "I do." Sophia set her bag down on the nearest chair very deliberately, the way she placed tools when she needed a moment to think. She looked around the office, the city spread out behind him, the quiet hum of an organization that employed tens of thousands of people on every floor below them, and then she looked back at him. "You came to my garage," she said. "You sat on my bench for 6 hours. You watched me work 2 jobs in 1 day. You ate a sandwich alone in a diner on Route 9. She paused. "And you own all of this." "Yes," he said again. He didn't dress it up. "Were you laughing at me?" The question came out more direct than she intended and landed harder than she expected. Something crossed his face, quick, genuine, almost like pain. "No," he said. "The opposite." He told her then. Not the polished version, not the press release, the real one. 8 months ago, Adrian had discovered that his most trusted inner circle, people he had built the company with over a decade, had been systematically manipulating procurement contracts, falsifying vehicle safety data, and steering the company toward a merger with a firm that would dismantle safety standards in exchange for an enormous short-term profit. The kind of merger that looked perfect on paper and would eventually put dangerous vehicles on roads where ordinary people drove their children to school. He had found out, and he had not known who else knew, and he had not known who he could trust. So he had done the only thing that made sense to him. He had left. Not publicly. Officially, he was on an extended working retreat, but genuinely left. Driven away from the city with no security, no entourage, just a car and a need to remember what it felt like to be around people who hadn't been shaped by his money. "Sophia," he said quietly, "in 8 months, you are the first person who treated me like a regular human being, charged me a fair price, gave back money I offered because you didn't want more than you earned, and told me when I was wrong without hesitating." He stopped. "I wasn't studying your life for entertainment. I was trying to remember what honesty looked like." The room was very quiet. Below them, the city moved and buzzed and didn't care. Sophia stood still for a long moment. She thought about $60, about a bench, about a diner and a cold parking lot, and an envelope she still hadn't decided what to feel about. She thought about a woman who had rebuilt her life from almost nothing, and a man who had everything and had somehow gotten completely lost inside it. "You should have just told me," she said finally. "I know," he said. "I should have." It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was the door to it, left open a crack. Neither of them moved to close it. The photo appeared online on Wednesday morning. Someone at the charity event had taken it, a background shot, not even the main subject. But there they were, Adrian and Sophia, standing close together near the back of the crowd, his face turned toward hers, her looking up at him, with an expression that a stranger could read 100 different ways. The caption someone had attached before it spread was short and cruel and effective. "Billionaire Adrian Voss and mystery woman. Who is she and what does she want?" By Thursday, it had 40,000 shares. By Friday morning, Sophia's garage had been identified. Her full name was in 3 separate tabloid articles, and someone had spray-painted the word "Gold Digger" in red letters across the shutter door. Sophia stood in front of it at 6 in the morning with a bucket of soapy water and scrubbed it off herself before Leo woke up. She didn't tell Adrian. She didn't tell anyone. She just scrubbed and went inside and opened for business like it was a normal day. It was not a normal day. Darren Reyes, who had not been Darren Reyes in any practical sense for 7 years, having left when Leo was 11 months old and a steady income felt less appealing than disappearing, pulled up to the garage at 11 in a car that was newer than anything he had any obvious right to own. Sophia saw him from under a Volkswagen and recognized his shoes before she saw his face. Tan leather loafers. He had always worn tan leather loafers. She rolled out slowly. He looked older, thinner in the face. He was smiling the specific smile he used when he wanted something, warm, slightly apologetic, constructed to make the other person feel like they were the reasonable one for giving it to him. "Sophia," he said, like they'd seen each other last week. She stood up. She wiped her hands. She waited. "I've been thinking about Leo," he said. "I want to be in his life. I know I've been absent, and that was wrong, and I've done a lot of thinking about it, and I think it's time for me to step up and—" "What did they offer you?" Sophia said. Darren blinked. "What?" "The reporters. What did they offer you to come here?" His smile flickered, just for a second, then it rebuilt itself. "I don't know what you're talking about. I came because of my son." "You've known where we were for 3 years," Sophia said. Her voice was completely calm, which was the version of her voice that meant she was the furthest from calm. "You've never come. Leo's birthday is in March. You've missed 7 of them. You're here 4 days after my name appears in a tabloid connected to a billionaire." She looked at him steadily. "So I'll ask again. What did they offer you?" Darren's smile finally gave up. "It's not like that," he said, and the way he said it confirmed exactly that it was. He was gone within the hour. Sophia didn't raise her voice once. She simply made clear in precise and quiet terms that Leo was not a story, that she was not a story, and that if he spoke to any reporter about her or her son, she would pursue every legal avenue her situation allowed, which admittedly wasn't many, but which she would use with absolute consistency. Darren left. The tan loafers crunched on the gravel and disappeared. Sophia went back under the Volkswagen. What she didn't know was that Darren had already spoken to a reporter. 2 days earlier, before he'd even come to the garage, which meant the visit was never really about Leo at all. It was about seeing her face when she found out, because that reaction was the follow-up story. The article published that afternoon. Sources close to the family, which meant Darren, claimed Sophia had strategically inserted herself into Adrian's life after his Ferrari broke down, that she had researched him before offering help, that the charity event had been a calculated social climb. Every sentence was false. Every sentence was printable. By evening, the comments under the garage's listing page had turned ugly. People who had never met her, and never would, were utterly certain about who she was. Townspeople she had served for years were suddenly asking questions they shouldn't have needed to ask. A woman at the diner told another woman, loud enough for Sophia to hear from the counter, that it was suspicious how quickly things had moved, wasn't it? Sophia carried 2 plates to a table and said nothing. When she got home that night, Leo was quiet, in a way that meant he had heard something at school and hadn't decided yet whether to ask about it. She sat on the edge of his bed after he was settled and smoothed his hair back and told him that sometimes people said things about other people that weren't true, and that none of it changed who they were or what they'd built. Leo looked up at her. "Did the man with the Ferrari do something bad?" "No," she said honestly. "He didn't." Leo thought about it. "Then why is everyone angry?" She didn't have an answer for that. She kissed his forehead and turned off the light. The next morning, she called Adrian and told him to stay away. Sophia had told Adrian to stay away, and he was respecting it. She knew because she kept half expecting the Ferrari to appear in her lot, and it never did. No calls, no envelopes under wipers, nothing. He was giving her the space she'd asked for, which she appreciated, and which also, if she was honest with herself, felt worse than she expected. She didn't examine that feeling too closely. There was no point examining things you couldn't afford to act on. The garage kept her busy. The foreclosure clock kept ticking. 19 days left now, a number she updated in her head every morning without meaning to. Leo was quieter than usual at school. The spray paint was gone from the shutter, but she could still see the ghost of it when the light hit at a certain angle. Life was compressing. She could feel it, the way you feel a storm before it arrives, a pressure in the air, a stillness that isn't peace. The call came from a man named Daniel Reeves on a Thursday afternoon. He introduced himself as a lead engineer in Adrian's company, not a corporate person, he said quickly, an actual engineer, 20 years in development, the kind of man who used the word chassis as punctuation. He had gotten Sophia's number from Adrian, with her permission sought first. He wanted to know if she'd be willing to attend a private vehicle test run on Saturday at the company's testing track outside the city. "Why me?" she asked. "Because Adrian said you see things," Daniel said simply, "and I'm running out of people I trust inside that building." Something in the plainness of that stopped her. "What kind of test run?" she asked. "New safety prototype, high-speed handling, investor and media attendance." A pause. "I've been finding irregularities in the pre-run diagnostics for 2 weeks. Small things. Individually, they mean nothing. Together," he stopped. "Together, they mean something I can't prove yet, and can't afford to be wrong about." Sophia looked at the foreclosure letter under the fruit bowl, at Leo's football boots by the door, one lace snapped and not yet replaced. "I'll be there," she said. The testing facility was nothing like the charity hotel. It was functional and serious. Long, straight tracks, a banked curve section, monitoring equipment in a glass observation room where investors in expensive coats stood with branded coffee cups pretending to understand the data feeds. Daniel met her at the entrance. He was exactly what he'd sounded like on the phone, a man shaped by decades of practical work, more comfortable near machinery than people. He walked her through the car quickly, speaking low. The prototype was a flagship safety model. Collision response systems, automatic stabilization, emergency brake assist. The exact type of vehicle that the dangerous merger would eventually compromise if it went through. The irony sat in Sophia's chest like something swallowed wrong. She looked at the car carefully. Daniel walked her through his irregularities, 3 separate diagnostic inconsistencies he'd flagged internally and been told twice were within acceptable variance. She crouched beside the car and looked where he pointed. She asked him to run the stabilization system manually in static. She watched the response pattern. She stood up. "Run it again." He did. She crouched back down and looked at a specific relay junction that had no reason to be the problem and was absolutely the problem. "Someone adjusted the threshold calibration on the emergency brake assist," she said quietly. "It won't respond at standard trigger speed. You'd need to be going significantly faster than normal test conditions for it to fail visibly." She looked at Daniel. "But in a real emergency situation, at highway speed?" "It fails," Daniel finished. His face had gone gray. "It was done recently," Sophia said. "The calibration seal is readhered. Someone who knew exactly what they were doing went in and adjusted it just enough." They looked at each other. "We need to stop the run," Daniel said. Getting to Adrian through official channels took too long. His corporate phone went to an assistant. The track operations manager looked at Daniel's concerns with the polite skepticism of someone who had been told the car was fine by 3 people above his pay grade.
Sophia didn't wait. She walked directly to the observation room, past 2 people who told her she couldn't enter, and found Adrian standing with 2 board members reviewing the run schedule. He saw her face and went very still. "The brake assist has been tampered with," she said. "Specifically calibrated to pass static checks and fail under real emergency conditions. Someone inside your building did it deliberately and recently." The room went silent. One of the board members, a compact man with a hard face whose name she didn't know, started to speak. "That's an extraordinary claim without—" "Junction Relay 4, Sophia said, without looking at him. "Readhered calibration seal. Threshold adjusted by approximately 12% above standard trigger speed. Test it yourself." Adrian didn't look at the board member. He looked at Sophia for exactly 1 second, then turned to the track operations manager. "Stop the run," he said. "Now." They tested it. She was right. The evidence recovered from the vehicle's internal log, timestamps, access records, pointed directly at 2 of Adrian's own senior executives, the same executives who had been pushing the merger for 18 months. Adrian stood in the operations room looking at the data and said nothing for a long time. Then he looked across the room at Sophia. She had just saved lives. She had also, without knowing it, handed him everything he needed to bring his own company back. The investigators moved fast after the testing track incident. Adrian's legal team filed emergency motions. The 2 executives, a man named Harlan Cross, who had been with the company 11 years, and Gerald Watts, the strategy head who had been quietly tracing Adrian's movements for weeks, were suspended pending investigation. Their access to company systems was revoked within hours. Adrian sent Sophia a message that evening. Short, careful, the kind of message written by someone who understood they had used up their right to assume things were fine between them. "They know you were there today. Be careful." Sophia read it standing in her kitchen. Leo was at the table finishing homework. The fruit bowl was 3 feet away, with the foreclosure letter still underneath it. 11 days left now. She typed back, "Understood." Then she locked the front door, which she didn't always do, and checked it twice. She smelled it before she saw it. 2 nights later, just after midnight, she woke to a smell that her brain identified before she was fully conscious. Not wood smoke, not a neighbor's fireplace. Accelerant. The sharp chemical undertone of something burning that was meant to burn. She was out of bed and at Leo's door in 4 seconds. "Leo, get up! Shoes on, now!" He was 8, and he trusted her completely, and he didn't ask a single question. Shoes on in 30 seconds. She grabbed his hand, her phone, and the folder of documents she kept on the top shelf of her wardrobe, Leo's birth certificate, her father's original lease papers, the scholarship letter she had never thrown away, and they were out the back door in under 2 minutes. From the street, they watched the garage burn. It wasn't her house. The fire had been set at the garage itself. the building behind the main residence, connected by a covered walkway that the fire had already consumed by the time the trucks arrived. The firefighters were good, and they were fast, and they saved the house. The garage they could not save. By 3 in the morning, it was embers and blackened frame. Her father's tools, the workbench he had built himself from reclaimed timber, the logbooks he had kept in his careful handwriting, recording every vehicle he had ever worked on, going back 30 years. The photograph on the office wall of the two of them standing in front of the garage the day he had officially transferred the lease to her name. All of it gone. Leo stood beside her in the street, wrapped in a blanket one of the neighbors had brought out. He didn't cry immediately. He looked at the ruin of it with the specific silence of a child who is too shocked to process what they're seeing. And then he turned and pressed his face into her side, and she held him and looked at the smoke rising against the night sky and felt something inside her go very, very quiet. Not broken, quiet. There is a difference, though in that moment it was difficult to explain what it was. The fire investigator confirmed accelerant by morning. The case was opened as arson. Adrian arrived at 8. He didn't call first. He simply appeared at the edge of the property, alone. No driver, no assistant, looking at what remained of the garage with an expression that wasn't complicated. It was direct grief. The grief of someone who understood exactly what had been taken and why. He looked at Sophia. "I'm sorry," he said. "This happened because of me." "It happened because of criminals," she said. "You didn't set the fire." "My world brought it here." "Your world didn't build that garage. My father did." She looked at the ruin. "They burned the building. They didn't burn what he taught me." Adrian was quiet for a moment. Then, "What do you need?" "Nothing from you," she said. Not harshly, honestly. He nodded. He didn't leave. The connection to Cross and Watts came 48 hours later when investigators found a burner phone in a car registered to a lower-level employee who broke within 20 minutes of questioning. The order had come from Watts. The goal was simple: frighten Sophia into silence before the merger investigation became public and before she could testify to what she'd found at the testing track. When Sophia was told this, she sat with it for a long time. They had burned her father's garage to protect a business deal. They had looked at everything she had, the little that remained after years of loss, and decided it was a useful thing to destroy. She thought about Leo's face in the street at 3 in the morning. She thought about her father's handwriting in those logbooks. She thought about how much had already been taken from her by circumstance, by bad luck, by people who left, and how all of it she had absorbed and continued. And now men in suits in a city office had deliberately chosen to take more. The quiet thing inside her shifted. "I want to testify," she told the investigator. "Publicly. Whatever format, whatever is most useful. I'll say everything I know." The investigator looked at her. "There may be further attempts to intimidate, I know," Sophia said. She called Adrian that evening. He answered on the first ring. "I'm going to testify," she said. "I need you to not try to protect me out of it." A pause. Then his voice, steady and certain. "I'll be right beside you." For the first time in weeks, she didn't tell him to stay away. The courtroom was smaller than Sophia had imagined. She had built it up in her mind over the weeks of preparation, something vast and intimidating, full of sharp-suited lawyers and hostile eyes. The reality was a mid-sized federal hearing room with fluorescent lighting, wooden paneling that needed refinishing, and a smell of old carpet that reminded her, oddly, of her primary school. She sat in the witness chair and told the truth, all of it. The testing track, the relay junction, the re-adhered calibration seal, the deliberate 12% threshold adjustment that would have caused a flagship safety vehicle to fail a real emergency braking situation at highway speed. She used precise language because precision was what she had,
and she didn't dress it up or perform emotion because she didn't need to. The facts were enough.
Harlan Cross sat at the defendant's table and didn't look at her once. Gerald Watts looked at her the entire time, with the flat expression of someone recalculating a situation they had badly misjudged. She looked back at him steadily whenever her eyes moved that direction. She wanted him to understand clearly that she was not a woman who looked away. Adrian was in the gallery. He had offered to sit elsewhere if his presence complicated things. She had told him to sit where she could see him. He had, without question. The verdict came 6 weeks later. Cross and Watts were convicted on charges of corporate sabotage, destruction of property, and conspiracy to obstruct justice. 3 additional executives who had known about the safety data manipulation and said nothing were removed from their positions and faced separate civil proceedings. The merger was formally cancelled by Adrian the same morning the verdict was announced, not under legal pressure, but by his own decision, filed the night before, as though he had been waiting for the right moment to close a door he should have shut months earlier. Sophia was in the garage when she heard. The rebuilt garage. It had gone up faster than she expected, which was Adrian's doing, though he had been careful about how. He hadn't written a check. He had called in a construction firm that owed him a professional favor, arranged the materials through a supplier who had been trying to secure a contract with Voss Automotive for 2 years, and organized the labor through a training program his company ran for young tradespeople. Everything legitimate. Everything traceable. Nothing that could be called charity if you looked at it directly. The new garage was better than the old one. Cleaner lines, proper ventilation, a diagnostic bay with actual modern equipment. The workbench was rebuilt from the same type of reclaimed timber her father had used. Sophia had found the original supplier after 3 phone calls and ordered it herself. That part she had insisted on doing alone. On the wall above the desk, she had hung one thing. Not a photo. A single framed piece of paper. Leo's crayon drawing of a race car, slightly singed at one corner where she had retrieved it from the debris the morning after the fire. She had it mounted and framed, and she put it exactly where her father's photograph had been. Different memory. Same wall. Same love. It was a Tuesday morning when Adrian came to see her, 3 months after the trial. He sat on the new bench, same position, same posture as that first morning on the old one, which she suspected was deliberate, and waited until she had finished with a customer before he spoke. "I want to offer you something," he said, "and I need you to hear the whole thing before you say no." She leaned against the workbench and crossed her arms. "That's a concerning opening." Voss Automotive is launching an innovation center, practical engineering, real tools, real problems, specifically for young mechanics who couldn't access formal training, the kind of people who learn the way you learned, by doing it, by growing up in garages like this one. He paused. "I want you to lead it." Sophia was quiet. Not as a figurehead, not as a name on a board, as the actual director. You design the program, you choose the people, you decide what gets taught and how. Full authority, proper salary, the kind of resources you should have had 15 years ago. "And the garage?" she said. "Stays open," he said immediately. That was never a question. She looked at him for a long moment. She thought about a 17-year-old girl who had won a scholarship and deferred it once, and then deferred it again, and then quietly let the dream fold itself away because life had needed something different from her. She thought about her father's voice. "Don't look for what's wrong first. Look at what's right, and the wrong will show itself." "Yes," she said. Not because she needed rescuing. She had never needed that. But because some doors deserved to be walked through when they finally opened, and this one had her name on it from the beginning. That afternoon, Leo came to the garage after school, dropped his bag in the corner, pulled on the small spare apron she kept hung on the lowest hook, and went to speak to a waiting customer about their car, with a seriousness that made the man blink and then smile. Sophia watched from across the garage. Her father had done the same for her, 30 years ago, on a different Tuesday. A child in an apron, a waiting customer.
A whole life quietly beginning. Some things broke, some things burned, and some things, the ones that mattered, the ones built from love and stubbornness and the refusal to stop, those things continued. The garage door was open, the light came straight in. Sophia picked up a wrench and got back to work. End.